Guys, here's where things really start to pick up, so pay attention. We're finishing the book today. I don't go to the nail salon in the morning. I stay back to wait for the plant delivery. Henry came yesterday and took a look, and he said that he would bring me some things. But it's not just the regular nursery van that arrives at 10:07. When what pulls up is a large truck, and there's a forklift in the back, and a van is followed with 4 workers. I go into the street, and Henry and his cousin Phil are just lowering the lift gate. I see the truck, and I see a big box of timber bamboo. It's being transported on its side. Standing upright, it would have been over 20 feet tall. There are other plants in the truck. A diverse selection of flowering vines to climb up the metal poles to the second story. Ground cover, even a 3-year-old cherry tree. I'm overwhelmed, but there isn't time to express it because there's a lot of work to be done. The 4 workers cut down the sunflowers. This would have been sad, except now it isn't. We decide to hang the long stalks from the second-story balcony, and the large flowers on the side are the size of human heads. The bright yellow petals are now dried, and the centers are dark. Henry has a green twine that I am in charge of that project down while the workers dig a huge hole. It takes almost 4 hours to plant all of the stuff, but the day is not over. Another surprise, Lorenzo from Bakersfield Electric brings a set of solar-powered lights which at night will send shafts up the foliage into the starry sky. It's more than I had ever hoped for. Lorenzo says the nursery guys called him and explains about something called the Favor Bank. I haven't heard of this before, but I'm thinking it has a lot to do with accounts of people at this point. I watch Lorenzo put the light fixtures in place, but I can't stop myself and end up moving them around so that they are just where I want them to be. I explain that I like to see space in terms of triangles, and he listens. When we finish, he gives me his card, and he says he wants to talk to me about a big lighting job that he's bidding at a new shopping complex. I tell him that I'd be glad to look over his design sketches. It can be part of my Favor Bank. After he is gone, I water everything with a hose Henry left for me. We sit on the stairs and we watch as people arrive home. Everyone is stunned. No one can believe how beautiful the garden looks. The 3 of us are all together on the steps when Dell comes in from the carport. I guess he knew something was going to happen. He says that Henry called him, and I can't believe what he's able to keep any kind of secret. Dell is very, very happy when he sees the plants, and Mai uses Dell's cell phone to tell her mom to come home early. She wants to get a view of the garden in the daylight. Patty makes it to the apartment just as the horizon is going purple. There are streaks of color overhead, and she looks up into the darkening sky. She says it's no longer wrong to call this place the Gardens of Glenwood. We go upstairs, and I take Cheddar and I lie down in my bed. I'm exhausted, and so's Cheddar. But I think snoozing is his default setting, so I can't be sure. I fall asleep even though I haven't eaten dinner and it's barely dark outside, but I wake up to the sound of the television and the smell of popcorn. Kwang Ha appears in the doorway and says, Dell put up the building rep sign again in front of the best parking spot. We look at each other and we're laughing, but just with our eyes. Dell got the mail. It was always bad news, so some days went by before he bothered to take out his strangely sharp key and open the metal box in the front gate. The mailbox was stuffed. As always, there were overdue bills mixed with throwaway flyers printed with cheap black ink that rubbed off on his fingers, but today there was something more. He got a letter addressed to Patty Nugent in his hands. She didn't get mail here. He read the return address, Kern County Department of Child Service, and he suddenly felt queasy. He was sweating and he was dizzy. Maybe he could drive off and never come back. If he did, at least the cat would be covered. He couldn't imagine a world where Willow wouldn't figure out a place for the furball. Dell delivered the letter to Patty, and then he'd gone straight down the hall. Now he was in his bed, and his laptop was open. He was staring at the Kern County Child Service website. In the state of California, a person could have a temporary custody of ward of the state for a few weeks, or under special circumstances, several months. But after that, the goal was permanency. The hope was that the guardian would step forward. Dell felt his leg twitch, and then it jerked spontaneously like he was kicking a soccer ball. Ever since he started jogging, his limbs seemed to be functioning independently from the rest of his body. Was it possible that he could become the guardian of the 12-year-old? Even if he wanted to, and he didn't really, did he? He had debt, and he barely had any job security, and he'd never even been able to follow through on getting a coffee card stamped correctly at the place where he sometimes gets his morning brew. But had things changed? Wasn't he now the building rep of Gardens of Glenwood? Hadn't he been driving the 2 Nugent kids to school every day? Plus, he wasn't just holding down a job, he was possibly getting better at it. Wasn't he the one who supervised the biggest transformation that had ever happened at the apartment building? Okay, so maybe he hadn't supervised, but he was at least part of it, and he did operate the rototiller. Dell shut his laptop, but his leg kept twitching. No one knew that they had gotten close, and now Hario was the first person Patty needed to talk to. His cell phone rang, but he didn't answer. She knew that if he was driving, he couldn't pick up, but he would. He'd call her back, and they would figure it out, the two of them, what to do. It was December, and the brutal heat was only the real constant, for months had just broken the week before, and it was like someone flipped on a switch and changed the season. Nights were now suddenly cool, and fans and air conditioners had finally been put away for their 4-month-long electronic hibernation. Patty slipped out of her too tight shoes, her feet seemed to be growing, and stared at the letter from the state of California. It was for the custody hearing. It had been twice postponed, but now it was real. Decisions had to be made. She folded the letter in half and promised herself that she would do the right thing. As we climbed into the bunk beds, I explained to Mai that everything is in shock, which happens when a plant is first put in new soil. I know from experience that some things will thrive and other things will wither. Only time will expose the difference. Balance is critical in the natural world. I'm still feeling triumph of the garden the next day when I get the news. I don't like Lenore Cole from Jameson, but the name is fairness, and I admit it would be hard to build a case that she isn't doing her job. She's found a place for me, and it's permanent. She has come over today to the nail salon to tell me in person and then asks me if there's anything I need. We've been speaking outside in the parking lot, but Patty must know. I've been with them for almost 3 months. It was always temporary. Patty had never met me until the day a hospital supply truck drove through a red light. I understand better than anybody how much she's done for me. These are the facts. I'm going to be placed in a group foster care home on 7th Street. It figures that it wouldn't be 8th or 9th. She says it's okay for me to cry, and I tell her I'm fine, and I say that I would like to go to the library, and she volunteers to take me. I'd like to be around books. When Lenore and I are ready to leave, Patty tells me that Dell will pick me up at the library after work. I won't have to take the bus. I say thank you, and we go to Lenore's car. I feel numb, but I'm moving on. That's how Lenore puts it when we get into her car. Her exact words are, "It's time to move on." It feels like something I might hear in a cafeteria lunch line when I've stared too long at the mysterious noodle dish. And then Lenore adds, "Transitions are important. We want you to spend the morning at Jameson tomorrow and then go to the hearing in the afternoon." So that's moving on. It means that this is happening right away. And this surprises me. I thought when she told me she meant in 5 days or 2 weeks, not tomorrow. Lenore is a professional, and she must have some experience in all of this. It might be like ripping off a Band-Aid quickly. It doesn't hurt as much because the large component of pain has to do with the anticipation. So maybe that's why she didn't tell me until now. I say goodbye to Lenore and I go into the library. Once I get inside, I hold my hands right up close to my face. I'm breathing too fast, but I'm not crying. I'm thinking about Mai and Kwang Ha and Patty and Dell. They're taking me away from these people, and I don't think I can live now without them. I go straight to my favorite area, which is upstairs in the corner next to the window, and lead floods this spot. I get a book on astrophysics. I haven't thought about big picture concepts in a very long time. Maybe I've been too focused on smaller things. I've had my mind wrapped around specifics. Reading about galaxies and cosmic microwaves helped me to breathe more easily. I'm putting my place in the universe into perspective. When the time is right, I go sit outside on the steps. Now I'm thinking about the Nugents. Will they move out of the gardens? Will Dell go back to number 28? Maybe they can rent another apartment and stay in the complex. Mai won't just miss me. She's really going to miss the bunk beds and the closet. And what about Cheddar? And if they stay, I can come and visit on the weekends. I could still help with the gardens, I guess. I could walk or even call Hario to drive the taxi. I could increase my running and plot out a new loop that takes me right past the garden of Glenwood. Dell suddenly appears. I didn't see him coming. Did he sneak up on me, or am I not seeing things now? He sits next to me. He doesn't say anything. Then he puts his head in between his knees and he starts to cry. It's like he's choking to death right next to me. I put my arm around his shoulder and I softly whisper, "I'm all right. It's going to be okay." And that breaks him completely. He cries harder. He lifts his face to look at me, and I still have my arm encircling his hunched back. But I see something in his eyes. He looks heartbroken, and I know the look. Patty closed the nail salon early and took the bus home. It was cloudy outside, and the wind was blowing hard down the valley. There was dust and sand in the air, and when her teeth met, she felt the grit. She could taste it when she swallowed. Patty came through the door of the apartment and saw Kwang Ha at the table doing homework. He was never at the table doing homework. He was always watching TV. But he barely looked up when she came in, and he didn't say a thing. Patty noticed that his foot was twitching back and forth, not shaking, but close. She looked down the hall. Mai was in her room on the upper bunk bed. She had her face close to the wall and a cat held tight to her chest. So they knew. Patty went down the hall and stood in the doorway. "We're going to get it figured out." She walked to her bed and put her hand on her daughter's silky hair. "It's temporary." Suddenly, Kwang Ha's voice could be heard. He said loud, "That's what you say about everything, temporary. Well, if you do something long enough, you don't get to use that word anymore." Patty went back to the living room and stood in front of her son. Mai appeared behind her. Kwang Ha looked up at both of them. His eyes were large and defiant. "We shouldn't let her go." Mai came over and leaned against them. Outside, the gusts picked up and the window was open in the kitchen and they could hear a sound. It was different, though. It was something new added to the mix of street noise. It was the bamboo in the new garden. They could hear a rustling of 1,000 leaves. Del woke in the middle of the night, tried to get back to sleep, but he tossed and turned so many times it started to feel like exercise. At 2:47, he was worn out but still wide awake, so he got up. He stayed in sweatpants and a t-shirt, and he pulled on his shoes and a windbreaker, and then he went downstairs to the courtyard. It was cold out, and he could see his breath. He made his way to the coiled green hose. Standing in the light of the partial moon, he watched the water come out in gushes of icy silver. He knew for certain that this garden was going to be magnificent. I'm going to skip a few things here. This is just kind of about Mai and Kwang Ha wanting to go to the courthouse. And here we go, starting up at Jameson. I'm in a large room with 5 other girls at Jameson. We all have hearings today. 4 of the 5 girls are sleeping, or at least pretending to, and the 5th girl is talking on a cell phone. I have my computer with me, and I ask 3 times the woman at the front desk to give me the wireless password. No one else has a computer, so I feel bad using mine. But the other girls don't seem to care. Everyone in the room is in their own bubble of unhappiness, and there's not a lot of sharing, so I'm grateful for that. Since I have access to the wireless code, I decided to take a look at the Jameson system. The system, of course, is protected, but the firewall isn't very secure. So I've looked at a lot of code for electronic buffering. It's not a very sophisticated network because I see the transport layer. I get in right away. I go to Lenore's account, and when I look at her email, I suddenly feel sorry for her. She appears to be massively overworked, and there's an email from juvenile court, from schools, from the police department, mountains of stuff. All of this is too personal, and I really shouldn't be reading about this. What I'm doing is wrong. I have Dell's work files on my computer, and I transfer everything when I put together his laptop, but I never actually looked at any of this stuff. And now I find one of his files called DDS, and I read the Del Duke system of strange. There are names in all of these categories, and I go through them. Kwang Ha is a lone wolf, and Patty is a dictator. Mai is a junior dictator, and I see that for mutant there's only one name, and Del Duke listed himself. At first I'm appalled, but then I realize he's only trying to make sense of the world. Of course he's wrong. All of us are all of those things. I'm no genius, but I'm as much of a lone wolf or misfit or a weirdo as anyone else. When it came to the garden, I was the dictator. If there's anything I figured out in the last few months, it's that you can find labels to organize living things, but you can't put people in any kind of group or order. It just doesn't work that way. I close my computer, and in only a handful of minutes, a woman comes into the room and tells us that lunch is being served. I'm not hungry, but I follow the group into the dining area. After lunch, Lenore comes to get me. She says she likes the way my hair looks today, and it hasn't changed since she picked me up, so she might have just been trying to think of something positive to say, so I smile anyway. I'm not brave, it's just that other choices have been thrown out the window. Lenore takes me to see a grief counselor who's named Mrs. Bode Ernest. Sitting in her office, I realize that I'm not afraid of anything anymore. That word is exactly 7 letters, just a coincidence. Not long ago, I actually had a lot of fear. Now it feels like there's not a lot left to be afraid about. Lenore says, "Today is all just procedure. You will see the judge in private. He might ask questions. There's paperwork to be signed." Mrs. Bode smiles, and I understand that she is thinking of good news, or maybe she's just smiling to be encouraging. I don't share her optimism. The grief counselor says the beginning of anything is hard. I know you've been through a lot. We're going to get you in school, and you're going to make all kinds of new friends. I think about telling her that my school experience was never great, and besides Margaret Z. Buckle, I don't have any close friends. I've never met Mai until I met Mai in Kwangha and lived at the Gardens of Glenwoods. But I don't want to upset her. Lenore and I return to her car, and she explains that the judge will take legal responsibility for me. I'm hoping that it would be a woman and a person of color who sees and understands me as different, even strange, as Del Duca's figured out, but that I still have value. The court will now call the shots, and I can tell that Lenore feels bad right now, but none of this is her fault. I want her to understand. I want to tell her that I'm sorry, but instead I reach over and touch her arm, just my fingertips. After that, I don't say or do anything, and I can tell she understands. Once we get to the courthouse, I go to the bathroom. I need a few minutes by myself. I can see my always smiling mother and my strong father. I hear their words voiced in so many ways since as early as I can remember, and they were always trying to protect me. Were they too worried about me to look out for themselves, or was life so filled with random action that the very notion that's cause is futile? If the last few months have proven anything, it's that I don't need any more theories, but rather experiences with reality, even though the dose I received is enough to last me a lifetime. When I see the judge, I will try to convey a positive attitude while at the same time monitoring my blood pressure and other vital signs. There have been cases of stress-induced cardiopathy, which is also known as broken heart syndrome. Del was getting ready. He picked out a red tie and a suit, and it had been the first time that he had told his boss a version of the truth about why he wouldn't be at work. He was going to juvenile court to be there for one of the kids that he counseled. Instead of feeling like a lazy slacker, he had thought he could hear admiration in the voice of his supervisor, or maybe the guy was just yawning. Now he put on his suit, and he was surprised that he was able to button the waistband. The last time he found himself in a situation, he had to use a safety pin to keep his pants closed. It was solid evidence now that he had been losing weight. Down the hall in number 28, Patty debated what to wear and settled on a white silk shirt with 2 embroidered doves. It came from Vietnam. She already had on a black skirt from the discount store and red slippers. The doves were a symbol of love, the black skirt was to show respect, and the red slippers were, of course, lucky. Probably no one of authority would pick up the symbolism, but if they did, Patty would give them the right impression of her intent. Across town, Mai sat in her high school social studies class and stared out the window. It wasn't fair. She, of all people, should be there. She started this. The clock on the far wall behind the teacher's head hadn't moved in what seemed like forever. By the time the bell rang, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Mai explained to the woman at the office that there was a family emergency, and then she used a trick. She started speaking Vietnamese, rapid fire. That unnerved people, and the next thing she knew, she had a permission slip to get Kwang Ha out of biology, where he was actually paying attention, and only a few minutes later, the 2 Nugents were walking out the front doors on their way downtown. Mai looked back at the school and saw a decal in the classroom window. It was of a sunflower. Mai took that to be a good sign. Family Court has its own area on the 2nd floor of City Hall. I could ask a million questions about what will happen next, but I've decided that I'm going to go where the wind takes me, and it's gusting outside, so if that's any indicator, maybe I'll be blown far. Lenore knows her way around this place. I'm glad I can't hear what's being said between her and between a little man and a boy down the hall. I think that the waiting is the hardest part. I'm okay with it, because it's not like I'm rushing to get anywhere. Lenore leaves the room, and I realize that I could just run. But that's different from giving up. I had to give in. After a long time, a woman appears and says it's my turn to see the judge. I don't know what happened to Lenore, but I feel like I should wait for her. But the woman said that Lenore is dealing with something unexpected, so I just shrug. I think that everything Lenore deals with is unexpected. I follow the new woman in charge down the hall, and we turn and enter what is the judge's chambers. I guess judge's office doesn't sound as powerful. And that's when I see them. They're standing. Del has on a suit, which is pretty tight, and next to him on one side is Kwang Ha, and the other side is Patty. At Patty's elbow is Arrio. He wears a suit, so I almost don't recognize him. And in front, holding a bunch of tulips, is Mai. They're smiling, and I don't say anything. I don't move. I'm completely still. I don't know how to do that. I know how to do that. At the desk, the woman gets to her feet. She's wearing what I guess is the judge's robe, and it looks like a choir outfit, and I don't blink. Willow, I'm Judge Biederman, and I think you know these people. I'm not sure what to do. I realize tears are flooding my eyes, and I'm not crying. I'm just drippy. I don't know what any of this means. There has been a formal request made today by the court for your guardianship. A motion filed by Mr. Hario Hernandez and Miss Dong Nugent. Patty interrupts the judge. It's Patty. Judge Biederman continues, and I don't think people break in on her very often because her nose wrinkles up. Mr. Hernandez and Miss Patty Nugent are seeking the custody agreement as partners. I don't hear anything after that. I don't need to. I know Lenore comes in the room, and at some point she has her arm around me, and I sink into a chair, and I bury my face into my red hat, and I'm not sure if I'm laughing or if I'm crying. I hear Mai's voice, "It's going to be all right now. Don't cry, Willow," and I answer in Vietnamese, which means it's more than all right. Patty and Arrio aren't getting married or anything like that. They're just in some sort of relationship, which to me looks like more than friends. We find out that Patty hasn't been working late all the time. She and Arrio have been going out for dinner and even to a few movies and once to a poetry reading at Bakersfield College. We all have the same look on our faces when we hear this piece of news. Kwang Ha, of course, says, "Poetry reading? You've got to be kidding me." Dell wanted to go for guardianship too, but he's pretty much broke, and even though I recently put his accounts on autopay to help him straighten out some of his finances, he doesn't qualify. Arrio has some cash in his account from his prize, but the real discovery is that Patty's kind of a hoarder. While Dell spent years piling up plastic plates, Patty was stacking money. She hid this from everyone, but now the court needs to review all of her financial documents, and she has to admit that she's got, as Kwang Ha says, crazy mad money. I'm not supposed to see any of this, but Patty and Arrio didn't follow any of the correct procedures, and that means Lenore has to bring out the paperwork while I'm in the room. Judge Biederman says that he's going to look over all of this, of the red tape for now, and I can see that Patty likes the idea of red tape, obviously because of her attachment to the color. Lenore signs off on her part of the approval process and says that Patty and Arrio need to come back and do things the right way. The important thing is that for today, they are granted jointly the guardianship, which is on track not to be temporary, of a person named Willow Chance. That's now legal. Once this is said by the judge in an official way, Dell makes a show by dropping to the floor like he's doing the splits. It's supposed to be some sort of victory move, but he rips his pants in the crotch, which isn't just super embarrassing for him, but it makes Kwang Ha start to laugh. And it's his high-pitched giggle. And once that happens, the contagious thing gets going, and now I'm part of it, and I can see the look on the judge's scrunched face that it's time for us to move on. When we're outside, Mai gives me a big hug. Then Kwang Ha slings his arm around my shoulder, and I know that he's going to say something important. He lowers his voice, and I hear, "I have a paper due in English on Wednesday, Moby Dick. Hope you have time to read it." We walk across the plaza and get into Ario's taxi. We sit 3 in the front and 3 in the back. It doesn't look safe, but there are seatbelts for everyone. We decide to go to Luigi's restaurant since this is a favorite of Dell's, and he's got the most enthusiasm about it. I do nothing but smile when they offer me a meal. We're in the taxi driving back when Patty reveals something big. She wants to buy the building, the Gardens of Glenwood. We all think she's kidding, but apparently she's already spoken to someone at the bank and she's put in a formal offer. I don't know what to make of it, but Dell looks thrilled. I'm thinking that he won't get evicted if she owns the place, but I doubt that he'd still be the building rep. Kwang Ha is most energized by the news. I guess he still worries about going back to the garage behind the salon. He says that if his mom owns the place, we should make a skateboard ramp in the front entrance. I didn't know he was a skateboarder. Interesting. Patty says nothing is for certain, and that's the truest statement I've ever heard. In the late afternoon, after everything has settled down, I put away my garden clothes and I run the mile loop. And then I take a seat next to the timber bamboo in the courtyard. I know that I will think about this day many times, and then I realize it's the seventh month, and I'm not surprised. 7 is a neutral number, and it's a prime number. And there's 7 basic types of catastrophes. There are 7 days in a week. Isaac Newton identified 7 colors of the rainbow: violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, red. Dell put people into 7 categories: misfit, oddball, lone wolf, genius, weirdo, dictator, Newton. And I have my own system of order. I think that every stage of living there are 7 people who matter to you in the world. They are the people who are inside your heart, the people you rely on, and the people who change your daily life. For me, I count my mom always, my dad forever, Mai, Del, Kwangha, Patty, and Hario. I decide that when my head begins to pound from now on, I will shut my eyes and count to 7 instead of by 7s. I see each of these people like the colors of the rainbow. They are vivid and they're distinct, and they hold a permanent place in my heart. If the builder had more money, this area would have been a swimming pool, but it's not. It's a garden. I shift my position, and suddenly I feel something in my pocket. It's my lucky acorn. I get up and I pick a spot off to the side where I know there might be a space for something of size to grow. I punch my finger into the dirt and I make a small hole. I drop down the brown nut. I return to the stairs and I sit here in silence. They speak to me. The plants speak to me, not in words but in action. And what they tell me is that life goes on. And that is the end to Counting by 7's, my friends. It's time for our lit talk.